we're going to be learning, is it ever too late to do tshuva? Is there a situation where someone has messed up so far that Hashem says, I'm sorry, the door is shut? We're learning chapter 4 in Hilchas Tshuva of the Rambam, and it's actually excellent that the way we're doing this, we're doing the Rambam's halachas, and then what Tanya tells us about Tshuva, and then we're going back to the Rambam and painting an entire picture of what Tshuva really is. This is a opportunity, and I hope it's very helpful for the ideas that we share and the thoughts in connection with Tshuva and beneficial topics that will really help us as we get into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There was once a fellow who was, we'll call him Yussel. He was chronically late. Always came late to work. And he tried to put different types of alarm clocks and ask people to wake him up and to call him. Nothing worked. He always came late. And things were getting out of hand. His boss was getting upset, and his boss said that if this doesn't stop, if you don't start coming on time, I'm going to have to terminate the job. So he runs to the doctor. He says, Doctor, I have a problem. I can't wake up in the morning. It's not normal. I mean, I tried alarm clocks and I tried people waking me up, and it doesn't work. He says, no problem. I have for you a pill. Take this pill. You'll sleep well. You wake up refreshed. You'll have no problem waking up. So this fellow takes the pill. He goes to sleep. And sure enough, 5 a.m. he's up and he is excited. He comes to work. He walks into the boss's office 20 minutes early. He says, Boss, I'm cured. I'm early and I'm ready to work. He says, that's great, but we waited for you all day yesterday. We learn many different things about tshuva. Today the Rambam tells us that there are more than 20 things that if a person did any of these, the door is closed for tshuva. Now, as the Rambam will conclude this chapter, so to stick around, he tells us that ultimately there's still a way to get around these. That even if someone transgressed what's considered to be 24 items that we say, Ein maspikin biyadeh, we don't allow him to do tshuva, nonetheless, there is a way, and he says this at the end of this chapter, that even all these following items, if a person committed them, it's still possible to do tshuva. Here we go. 24 items hold back the tshuva. And 4 of them is a great sin. The sin is so severe that tshuva is held back. The power, the ability to return is held back. And anyone that does one of these, Hashem doesn't, let's call it, make it easy for him to do tshuva. Because the sin, the transgression, is so great. Number 1, hamachti es harabim, a person who gets others to sin. He is an influencer, and he has certain abilities to persuade, and he gets others to do averis. We say such a person, not only that, but also someone who is me'akev, someone that holds back people from doing a mitzvah. So again, it's the same category. Whether you get many to sin, or you hold back, you stop somebody from doing a good thing, that's considered to be a great sin, and it's very difficult to do tshuva. Number 2, ba'amata es chaveirah, someone that moves their friend from a good path to a bad path. Someone is on the right path, and he goes and he slowly convinces him, encourages him, he helps him to get off of the right path in life. It's considered by Hashem to be such a terrible thing. Not only are you sinning alone, but you're getting other people who otherwise wouldn't do anything wrong. You're getting them to do things wrong. Number 3, Horaya B'nai, someone that sees his son who is going onto a bad track of behavior. Okay? He sees that his son, and the Rambam qualifies this, and he says this is a son who you have some influence over. And he's doing whatever he wants. He's not behaving properly. And you say, listen, I'm not going to tell him what to do. I'm going to mind my own business. Whatever happens, happens. So someone that does that, it's a terrible sin, because you have the power to impact your children if they're under your influence, and you have to use it out. And not say, whatever happens, happens. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to mix in. Now, granted, you have to be, I guess, careful how you do it, but not to just walk away and shrug and say, it's not my problem, it's not me, it's my kid. Because the Rambam tells us, if you would tell him something, if you would let your son know this is inappropriate behavior, or I'm not pleased with this, he'll stop. If you speak from the heart, it works. Included in this Avera is someone who has the ability to stop someone else from doing an Avera. You see your friend about to commit a crime, and you don't say, listen, why are you doing this? This is not appropriate. This is hurtful to somebody. I think you're going to regret this later. And you don't stop him. That is considered to be such a great sin. Hashem says, this is difficult. This type of tshuva, returning from this is going to be very hard. Now, I don't mean to walk around and tell everyone they're doing everything that they're doing wrong. It's an art, and you have to really know how to do it. But someone who you have a relationship with, and you know that he'll listen to you at least partially, and you see them doing something wrong, in a nice way, you could suggest that perhaps this is not the best way to behave. Okay? Again, we're not talking about walking around the streets and pointing out to each person what they're doing wrong. And number 4, someone that says, you know what, I'm going to sin now, I'll spend a couple of days, maybe this summer, I'll have a good time, and then I'll come to Shul on Yom Kippur and I'll do tshuva. So someone who knowingly goes, it's called echte ve'ashu, someone that knowingly goes and says, I'm going to do an Avera, but then I'll do tshuva, such a person, we say, it's very hard to do tshuva. Even Yom Kippur, because he said all along, I'm going to come to Yom Kippur and I'll clean up. Again, and I can't stress this enough, at the end of this parak, at the end of this chapter, the Rambam will tell us that there is a way to do tshuva, even for these things. So first let's understand the severity of these 4 averas, that they're so harsh that halacha says it's not a regular path to tshuva. Then we have 5 additional items. It's not because they're such a terrible sin, but they're technical. It's wrong, and because of these 5 wrong behaviors, it makes it hard, technically, for the person to end up doing tshuva. Number 1, someone that's peiresh min hatzibur, someone that separates himself from the community. He's never around when the community gathers. He's never interested. We had this in a prior chapter. When the community has a problem, he somehow disappears. Now, what happens technically as a result of not being there, you don't have part of their zchusim, part of their merits. Everyone's getting together, they're volunteering for a project, they want to help somebody. People are doing good together, and you're not there. You separated yourself. So you're losing out some of these merits, which will get you to do tshuva. Number 2, someone that's chelek al divrei chachamim. Someone that argues with the sages. I don't mean arguing with an opinion, trying to understand, but fighting them. And what happens is, a person ends up not being influenced by them. He doesn't have teachers. He doesn't know the path for tshuva, and then technically he doesn't do tshuva. Secondly, someone that makes fun of mitzvahs. Someone that laughs at mitzvahs. If you make fun of mitzvahs, so you end up not caring about the mitzvah. You don't value the mitzvah. So it's not because it's such a terrible thing. It's wrong. But because you make fun, for example, he makes fun of tefillin. Who needs tefillin? Why? What's the point of it? And so on and so forth. As a result, he starts to look at tefillin as unimportant. And the lack of value for it, he doesn't do it himself, and he doesn't regret down the road and say, I should start doing it. So this result of that causes, again, laughing at mitzvahs, makes it much harder to do tshuva. Number 4, Hamivaza es rabboisav, someone that embarrasses his teachers. Did I say 4? No, this is number 4. Number 1, thank you. Number 1 is someone that separates from the tzibur. Number 2 is who argues with the sages. Number 3, laughs at the mitzvahs. Number 4 is someone that embarrasses his teachers. And then when you embarrass them, like make fun of them and so on, what you're doing is you're causing them to push you away. Like Gehazi. Gehazi was an attendant to a great prophet named Elisha. Now the story, briefly, what happened with Elisha was visited by an Assyrian prince. This Assyrian prince had a leprosy, and he couldn't cure himself. He went to doctors and to professionals and experts, and he couldn't get cured. So he came to Elisha. Elisha cured him. Spiritually, he cured him. And he asked, this prince told Elisha, I want to reward you. I want to give you a lot of money. Elisha said, I don't want your reward. He had his reasons, whether it was going to be for the greater good of the Jewish people, or he wanted to sanctify God's name, and I don't do this for money, I'm doing this to help you. He had his reasons. The prophet didn't want to take any money. And it was a prince who could afford a lot of money and was willing to give it. But he refused to take, so the prince thanked him and he left. As he left, Gehazi, his attendant, ran after him and said, my rabbi changed his mind. Give me the money. Elisha was so upset at him that he said something in regards to the leprosy that left the prince, and so on. It should end up with him. The point is that sometimes a person gets involved with embarrassing people or rebelling against who would be your teacher or your rabbi, and he's not able to guide you and help you do tshuva. So it's not that the sin is unforgivable, but the technical result of that sin is such that you end up not doing tshuva because you don't have your teacher to. Elisha was obviously his teacher as well, and now he's not impacting him the way that he could have otherwise. And number 5, and this is a very interesting one, a person who is hasene as hatichaches, he hates criticism. You know, people, it's hard for them to take criticism. So the Rebbe writes in Hayom Yom that you should love criticism because it puts you onto the high road. Okay. When someone is able to turn to you and say, listen, what you're doing is wrong, or I think you're off, and you could take it and separate the person that's saying it and the feeling from the content and the message that he's giving you, you could improve. But if you hate hearing anything about you that needs improvement, even out of love, then you're not going to do tshuva, because who could correct you? Who could tell you, I think what you did yesterday was not so sensitive. Well, how dare you tell me what I should do? Okay, so nobody will end up telling you anything, and you don't end up doing tshuva. We find Moshe Rabbeinu, he rebuked the Yidden. He said pretty strong things to the Jewish people. Imagine if someone would do that today. We would just unfriend him. If such a thing would happen. If someone comes and tells, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, you have a heart that's stuffed, and you're not listening, and you're not doing what Hashem said, even an ox, even an ox knows who its master is, and this is a nation who doesn't know its master. He's pretty blunt and straightforward when criticism has to be given. Now, we're talking about receiving criticism. We're not talking about giving criticism. Giving criticism has to be done in a very, very gentle way. But when it comes to receiving, the Rambam says, if you're not going to be able to receive or listen to any type of criticism, then tshuva will be very difficult. Technically, it'll just be very hard to do. We find that the prophet Yirmiyah also gave the Yidden, Yeshaya also gave the Yidden Teichachish. Thank you. Actually, the Yad Asher is from Yeshaya. I said Moshe Rabbeinu is from Yeshaya. But Moshe Rabbeinu gives Teichacha, and Yeshaya gives Teichacha. He rebukes the people when they have to hear. It's not coming from a bad place, it's coming to help you. So the Rambam concludes the 5th item that if you hate criticism, good luck doing tshuva. Then there's another 5 items. What do we have so far? We have 4 that are such terrible sins that it's very grave and it's hard to do tshuva. We have 5 of them that because of the type of behavior that it becomes technically difficult to do tshuva. Now we have another 5 that a person that does that, he can't really do complete tshuva. Why can't you do complete tshuva? Because they involve other people and you made it difficult to figure out how to make amends with those people. Let's look at the 5 items. Yes? Someone that doesn't like criticism. Someone that, averos that are between man and his friend doesn't know that you did something wrong to him. You hurt somebody, but behind their back, they don't know about it. And you need to be able to ask for forgiveness. Let's look at each one of these items. Someone that curses publicly, a community. You say something about a group. You don't know exactly who's in that group. You don't have no way of knowing where they live today. You don't. What are you supposed to do? You'll do tshuva. You sincerely regret it. You're sorry. There may have even been a consequence for what you said. But how can you contact each one of those people and talk to them and say, listen, I'm sorry what I did. It was wrong. You don't know who they are. You don't know where they live. So someone that's mekalel as harabim, you didn't curse a particular person, that you could go and ask him for forgiveness. You could do tshuva. But the tshuva gemura, a complete tshuva, is hard. Number two, one who, and don't get any ideas, one who partners with a thief. Okay, a thief says, I'm going to do the stealing. And he comes to you with merchandise and he says, I have a really, really beautiful iPad. You meet him in the gas station parking lot. And he says, here's an iPad, it's $50, it's yours. And you know that it's stolen. And you take it from him because it's a good deal. Or he tells you here, for really cheap, you're going to take two. And later you want to do tshuva. You don't know who he took it from. So you could do tshuva on what you did, but you can't find the original owner. It was in the package. Okay? So the Ganev may know who he stole it from, maybe not. But you, who are partnering with that thief, you want to do tshuva and you will, but a complete tshuva, you're missing a piece. You can't return it. You can't even ask for forgiveness. You can't pay him back. And similarly, someone who helps a thief in some way. You give him cover, or you maybe encourage him or tell him, tonight's probably not the right night to go there. I know something about that place, and so on. So someone that helps a thief. And again, both of these aspects, whether you buy stuff or help partnering with him in some way, or you're encouraging him and helping him with his stealing, you can't do tshuva because you don't know who to go to for forgiveness. Number three, Hamaitze Aveda, someone that finds a lost object. We know that in Torah there's a mitzvah, it's a biblical commandment, it's the Iraisa, that if you find a lost object, you don't say, how's it go, finders, keepers, losers, weepers. But in Torah we don't say that. We say if you find something, you must go and try to find the owner. Hang up a sign, try to maybe the item has a name on it or some kind of identifying symbol. You don't do it. You found something 10 years ago, and you figured, whatever, this is too good, I don't want to return it. You didn't steal it, you found it. But you didn't put up a sign, you didn't ask the people, it was in a shul, you didn't look around. And then a few years later, let's say 10 years later, you say, you know what, I really should do tshuva. How in the world are you going to find the owner? So much time passed. He probably doesn't even remember that he had it, that he lost it. So you're doing tshuva, but it's not complete because the opportunity to truly amend it is gone. Secondly, a person who eats from or steals from the food and possessions of, he says here, poor people, orphans, and widows. And he's referring to a particular type. These are people that travel and wander from town to town. They don't have much. They can't survive in their own place. They don't have a breadwinner, someone that can take care of them. And they end up in one town for a few weeks or a few months. They move to the next city and the next town. They try to survive. And you went and stole from these people. You can't find them. They don't live here. There's no address that you could go to and say, listen, I'm sorry, I cheated you. I took something from you. You didn't notice. So you hurt the type of vulnerable person who they don't live, they're not living in a particular place, they're not part of your community, there's no phone number, you can't get back to them. And fifthly, is someone who receives bribery to change judgment. You know the story about the two lawyers. They're in a courtroom and they have an opportunity to ask each other questions. So one lawyer is asked, did you take any bribery to compromise this case? Basically, are you lying? So he just looks out the window. He asks a second time, did you take any bribery to compromise this case? And after 3 times, the judge says, counselor, answer the question. Did you take any bribery to compromise the case? He says, I thought he was talking to you, Your Honor. Someone that takes bribery has a very hard time doing tshuva, because when you said that the wrong person is innocent, and you changed the verdict because someone paid you to, the resulting effects of that go very, very far. The person that lost as a result didn't have money, as a result he had shame. Someone else, perhaps he got angry at them as a result of that and he said something. There are many, many chain effects of you moving away from truth. And you can't find all the impacts to be able to ask for forgiveness. You may find those 2 people and say, listen, I lied here. I took money and I didn't, and I made the wrong person innocent. But all the other impacts As a result of that, you don't. So the Rambam says this is a fifth type of transgression where it's hard to do tshuva. Not because you don't want to, and not because it's such a grave sin. It actually is considered to be very, very bad. But you technically can't ask for forgiveness or pay back or make up for the things that you ruined. Halacha Dalit. Let's stop for a moment for any questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
We see that there is another mala higher than just a chacha. We see from David HaMelech.
Yours?
No, it's his.
Go ahead.
It's the rabbi. This the keys. It's
Okay.
the rabbi keys. We see from David HaMelech when he ran out from Avshalom, and Shimi ben Gera came to him and insulted him and sweared at him and throwing him stone, and Tzuya, I believe, Shema ben Tzuya, asked David HaMelech to come and kill him. I mean, he was running away from Avshalom, and this guy come and insult him in Pharesia.
Right.
And David HaMelech refused, says, don't kill him. And the answer was, David HaMelech says to this guy, he's not the one who is insulting me, it's Hashem giving me a message through him.
Correct.
Obviously, later on, he coaches his son to take care of this enemy, etc.
That's a very high level. A very good point. It's a very good point. It's a very high level. But David HaMelech, when he was hurt by someone and they someone said, let's kill him, he said, don't kill him. It's not coming from him. It's coming from Hashem. That was the level of dedication and how he viewed it. Okay, halacha dalit. There are 5 things that when a person does them, the chazaka is, the normal occurrence of things here are, that the person won't end up doing tshuva from them. It's not technical, it's just the type of behavior that it is, the chazaka, the norm is that a person won't do tshuva. Why? Because most people look at these transgressions as very lenient. These are things which are looked at as, it's not a biggie, it's not important. Okay? And therefore, he does the Avera and he thinks it's not such a sin, big deal. Okay? There's certain sins like this, certain wrongdoings where a person says, everyone does it, right? Or it doesn't really matter, or they don't care, right? But it is a problem, and he won't do tshuva because he doesn't see it as significant to ever try to do tshuva for that. Okay, number 1. A person is sitting with a friend who has a meal, and that meal is not enough for him. It's not enough to eat. And you come by and you take a little bit. He's not going to stop you because he's embarrassed. But it's not enough for him to eat. And you kind of know that, but you want to take his food anyways. I'm not talking about the typical scenario. An extreme case. Let's say you're in a desert and the person's eating. And you come and you take a little bit of a suda, some of his meal. So you say, what's the big deal? But the Rambam says it's avak gezel. It's like robbing him. Because he's not going to stop you because the way you're doing it, and maybe you don't mean it that way, but the way you're doing it, it's in a situation that he has a very hard time saying no, but he didn't say yes, and he just kind of like sat and just started taking it out of his bag. So you think, what's the big deal? I didn't steal. He was right there. You could have snapped it and said, don't touch. But you did. But you didn't. He didn't do that to me, therefore I had permission to eat it. That's what you say. So he says no. That's a sin. It's like stealing. And you're not going to do tshuva because you never feel like, it's not a big deal. Number 2, someone that takes avoitay shel ani, it's a mashkin, an object of the poor person, and it's the only one that he has. And he said, what's the big deal? I didn't steal it. He's just lacking it. Okay, for example, the poor person came to you and he said, here's my shovel that I use to plow or to dig, to plant, my tools, and when I get the money, I'll pay you back. And here's my, for example, I want to get from you $100. The poor person comes to you, and you say, fine, but how are you going to pay back? So you say, here's my shovel, and this is my mashkin. Right? It's my collateral. But tomorrow he needs to use it to dig. Right? And you don't give it back to him. Now, it could be yours. It's a collateral. Let him use it, then take it back. You say, what's the big deal? I didn't steal it. I'll give it back to him when he pays me. But the problem is, the way he set up the collateral is that you own it, but he should be able to use it during the day. so he can make a living and pay you back, right? It's like he gives you the title to his car, and you say he wants to do Uber, and you take away the keys, and you say no. So you could own the car, but let him use it so he can pay you back. And you say, I didn't steal it, all I'm doing is just forcing him to pay me the money quicker. When you do something like that, you say, I'm not stealing, so I don't have to do tshuva. Right? Maybe it's easier with Uber than it is with a shovel from plowing and planting to understand the concept. But you say, I didn't steal it, I just holding it. It's stealing. Because you don't have the right to take it away from him that he can't use it and earn money. Again, he won't do tshuva. Why? Because it's not such a big deal. I didn't steal. Number three, someone who looks at arayos, he looks at inappropriate things they shouldn't be looking at, and he says, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just looking at immoral things. And when he does that, it's a sin. Because the pasuk, we say it in Shema, you should not stray after your heart and your eyes. When a person sees, it causes the heart to feel and to want, and it leads to sin. So he says, big deal, I'm just looking. And therefore he doesn't end up doing tshuva for that. But the truth is that it is a sin. Don't stray or go after your heart and your eyes. Number four, someone who has, and we talked about this in the past, someone who has kavod, who has honor, status, as a result of someone else's shame. And what he says is, I didn't embarrass him. If he was here and I chased him out, or I said something derogatory and I hurt him, I got to do tshuva. He wasn't here. I told someone else, don't go to that guy. He's a bad person. Use me. Okay? I shamed him. He doesn't know about it. I shamed him, and now I got either status or position or honor. I won't do tshuva because I'm going to say he wasn't hurt. He doesn't know about it. He wasn't embarrassed. And really, you embarrass somebody. It doesn't matter if he was there or not. There's different levels of shame. Obviously, in front of the person, it's much more hurtful. But you did something where you benefited of putting someone else down. And you went on doing tshuva. But you should. But you look at it as not important, so you don't do tshuva. Number five, someone that accuses a good person falsely. The guy's innocent, and you accuse him. So he says, what did I do? All I did was create an assumption about somebody. Right? I come and I say, I think that you're a thief. But you're not. You have no proof. Why are you saying that about somebody? And people will start to assume that maybe this person is not so trustworthy. You had no basis for what you said. You're assuming that a good person is not a good person. And you're talking about it. So people look at it, and now you change someone's reputation without any basis. And you say, did I do anything? Did I take anything from you? Did I sue you? All I did was say something that I don't know, I don't think, I suspect that you're not all, moral or ethical. And you create a problem, but you yourself look at it and say, it's not a big deal. So what happens is, you don't do tshuva because you don't care enough to do tshuva. You say it's not a big deal. Right? There was once only one time, somebody embarrassed someone in the shul. A guy gets up and he says, Yossel is a thief. And Yossel was all offended. And the rabbi came to him and said, you better announce tomorrow publicly that Yossel's not a thief. So he comes the next morning and he says, Yossel's not a thief? So the rabbi calls him up and says, what's this? He says, listen, I'm not a chazan. I don't exactly know the tune. But the point is that sometimes there's certain things that we do and we tend to tell ourselves it's not a big deal. That's not really a sin. That doesn't matter. And when you do that and you don't feel that it's wrong, you don't do tshuva. If you don't do tshuva, then you can never fix it. There's another 5 categories. And these are things, chamisha dvarim, 5 things, that anyone that does it, he ends up doing it. It's very, very hard to separate. You get into a certain routine, you get into a habit, you get accustomed to certain behavior that's wrong, and it's very hard to get out of it. Lefichach, therefore, tzarech adam lizar mehem, a person has to be very careful that you may get involved in these types of attitudes or behaviors, and you won't do tshuva because it's very hard to stop. Okay? For example, rechilus, lashon hara, going around and just bad-mouthing people, or talking negative about people, true or untrue. Someone that gets very angry, just heat it up all the time, and it's a certain drive, and you're just shouting and screaming and being angry. Someone that has bad thoughts, just always suspicious and just negative in the mind. Someone that hangs out with wicked people. You like it's exciting. Some of the bad people, it's exciting around them. There's always something going on. Okay, so someone that does it, he ends up learning from what they do, and slowly it impacts him. Okay, from you hang out with bad people, it impacts you. And all these things, I say, what's the big deal? So I thought negative about somebody. Okay, so I'm a little bit angry. I didn't do anything bad. But these are types of behaviors that they're very hard to stop. You get into a certain routine, and it's hard. It's not like you're going and you're premeditating to do something wrong. You catch yourself, and hopefully you'll stop doing it. It's more of a value, attitude, an approach, and it becomes almost second nature. And you could do tshuva for them, but it's hard to be peirush. It's hard to separate from it. And we said that in Hilchos Deis, the Rambam talks about this, that there's certain things that a person has to try to have good behaviors and good midos, good ethics and good emotions, the way you behave. And these are things that people don't see it as so important. So what if I'm a little bit jealous? So what if I'm thinking a little bit negative about somebody? You don't see it as a major crime. But you have to be able to tell yourself that you have to be positive, you have to have good midos, you have to want someone else's benefit, you have to not hang out with wicked people because you might learn from them. You have to maybe calm down a little bit, not be so angry. These things, we have to be very careful because once we get into it, it's very hard to be peirush, it's very hard to separate from. The Rambam says like this, Kol elu hadvarim, all of these things, 24 items that we mentioned, and similar things, even though we say they're ma'akev tshuva, it holds back from doing tshuva, because either the sin is so big, or technically you're separating from everyone else, or so on, or you did stuff that you can't find the owner to return it. It's certain things it's hard to do tshuva, or you look at it as a very unimportant mitzvah, so you never care to do tshuva. Whatever the various things that we just mentioned, he says, nonetheless, it doesn't stop doing tshuva. It's hard, but it's not impossible. Someone that comes and says, I'm going to have a good time today, tomorrow I'll repent. It's hard to do tshuva because it's hard to be sincere tomorrow if you had this in mind all along. If you don't really regret it. However, if he did tshuva, he's about tshuva, and he has a chelek in Elam Haba, he gets his portion in the world to come. Again, it's difficult, but if a person says, I'm going to do tshuva anyways, and in Tanya he talks about this at length. When a person comes and says, even though I said I'm going to do tshuva, and that's wrong, and really the door is closed, I truly regret what I did. I really, it bothers me. I'm not going to do that. It's hard to have that feeling, but if you do, you will be forgiven. Even if you can't find the person that it was a lost object, and you didn't care to return it, and now it's impossible to find the person, you could still do tshuva. It's very hard, it's not called a tshuva gemura, it's not complete because you can't return it, but Hashem will forgive you if you're very, very sincere. If you're very sincere and you truly do tshuva. Sincerity is not an easy thing. You can tell a person, behave this way, say this prayer, show up here, fast that day. But real tshuva, where you care and it's real, it's difficult. It takes effort, it takes desire, it takes refinement, it takes sensitivity. You could do it, but it's very hard. There's a story about Reb Leib Saris. He was how are we on time, by the way? He was a Talmid of the Baal Shem Tov. And Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidus, he was one of his students, a great tzaddik. And he actually was named Reb Leib Saris. His mother's name was Sarah. And she grew up she's the daughter of an innkeeper. And it's a story in itself, but without getting into all the details, a local baron rolled into the town and decided that he wants his son to marry this girl. And she's a fine Jewish girl, and she didn't want to marry him. And I don't know if he's a Cossack or whatever he was. She didn't want him. So what they did was, they said, we're going to force her. We're coming with him tomorrow. We're going to make a wedding. They never met each other even. I mean, he saw her, but they never had an interaction and so on. So that night, before they came, her father made a quick wedding for her with another guy. And he was an older person. Long story. But anyway, this Reb Leib Saris was a great tzaddik, and he was traveling to the Baal Shem Tov for Yom Kippur. And on the way, it was rainy, and they got a little lost, and he was hitching rides from one person to the next and going by foot. things didn't turn out exactly the way he planned, and he ends up in some village for Yom Kippur. Okay, now this is a village where most people left the village for Yom Kippur to go to the big city. It's too late. You can't travel anymore. It's almost Yom Kippur. He finds the shul, and he comes and says Tillim, and he hopes for a minyan. And slowly, as it gets closer to the start of Yom Kippur, a few Jews trickle in, and a few more. And altogether, there's 8 locals on him. There's 9. You need 10 for a minyan. So he turns to the people and he says, is there anyone else in town maybe that didn't make it, doesn't know it's Yom Kippur, or is coming tomorrow? Maybe we could get them. They tell him, no, all the Jews moved. They all left. I mean, they moved for Yom Kippur. Is there anybody, maybe someone who's not really observant, or anybody, just give me a Jew, I want. They said, there is one person. And they're like chuckling because this fellow, he said he was born to Jewish parents. He actually went to Jewish school, and he knows about Judaism, but for the last many decades, over 40 years, he's been not just completely disassociated with Judaism, but he makes us problems. He hates Jews. He is the baron, the local landowner. In those areas and those times, the local landowner did whatever he wanted. And he's basically in charge of everything here, and he hates us. He hates all Jews, anything Jewish. And he has a temper. I mean, he's Jewish, but he's not a candidate. So the Leib Sada says, show me where he lives. They were afraid to go to this baron's mansion. So they walk out of the shul, and they walk him down one street, a second street, and they say, you go down that road, you'll see a big mansion, that's his. So he has his kittel, the white clothing for Yom Kippur, the talis, his gartel. He tightens it, and he's walking down this town. And he comes to the mansion, he walks up the steps very proudly, and the Baron looks at him, and he says, my name is Leib Sardis. I'm a student, I'm a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. And tonight is Yom Kippur. The guy doesn't react, he just looks at him calmly. And you should know that even you could do tshuva. You could return. Come with me to shul, we need a minyan. The guy gets up and follows him to shul. And he comes into shul, and everyone there they almost fainted. I mean, this is a guy who they were afraid of, and he's in their shul. And he's really in charge of the whole place. They give him a talis, and they start Kol Nidre. And during Kol Nidre, this talis is over his head, and they could hear that he's crying. And he asked, after davening, he wants to stay here for the night. So he stayed the whole night in shul, praying, saying Tehillim. In the morning, they had a minyan for Shachris, and then all the prayers of Yom Kippur. And it came to Ne'ilah. This Reb Leib Sardis, he was the Chazan. He led the prayers. And as he's leading the prayers, this by Ne'ilah, that's the final and high point of Yom Kippur, the doors to the Aron Kodesh are open. And you see the Torahs. At the very end of Ne'ilah, we say Shema Yisrael. We call out that Hashem is one. We say Baruch Shem 3 times. And then we say Hashem Hu Elikim, the Lord is our God. We say it 7 times. This Baron, who's been under the talis the whole Yom Kippur, gets up, he walks to the Aron Kodesh, and he puts his head inside, and he starts to say the Shema, and Baruch Shem, and his body's trembling, his voice is getting louder, and as he says the 7th time, Hashem Hu Elikim, he drops and he passed away. This Reb Leib Sardis would say Kaddish for him, the man that he met the night before, every single year on Yom Kippur, and he said this person, despite everything he did, and he caused a lot of trouble for those people, and he behaved very, very, we'll just call it wrongly. But on that Yom Kippur, something overcame him, and he was very sincere and very real, and the door of tshuva is never locked. And if a person really tries and really wants to, as the Rambam says here, if a person does tshuva, he's about tshuva and has chelek and elam haba. Even if he said, I'm going to do this and I'll do tshuva later, even if it's areas that he didn't care about or it's hard to separate from, even if it's such harsh things where he got other people to sin, it's still possible. A person could always return, a person could always change, a person can do tshuva. Questions?
Good story.
Very good. Join us again tomorrow. It's Hashem. We'll continue in our learning of halachas of tshuva, in halacha, in chassidus. Thank you for joining.
Shakar.